In the past few minutes, the White House confirmed President Trump has spoken to Volodymyr Zelensky following the Anchorage summit with Russian President Vladimir Putin. It was described as a lengthy phone call from Air Force One as Mr. Trump made his way back to Washington. Here he is as he left the plane just moments ago. Mr. Trump has also spoken to NATO leaders. Presidents Trump and Putin failed to reach an agreement to end the war in Ukraine. But Mr. Trump said great progress had been made. Our State Department correspondent Tom Bateman reports.
Isolated no more, this was a red carpet welcome. Even a presidential applause given for the architect of the Ukraine war. And a warm greeting that melts the freeze the US imposed on Russia's place in the world. A gift to his counterpart on US soil. Still, American firepower was being flexed. Some were still asking the tough questions.
President Putin, will you stop killing civilians?
But for the Russian leader, a privileged ride in the back of the presidential Cadillac, the Beast, a chance for a private chat, leader to leader. Then began their near 3-hour meeting with two top advisors each. Would Mr. Putin cede to Mr. Trump's demand for a ceasefire? Ukraine was not invited to this summit, where its fate was discussed, and a second day of protests in its support took place nearby. While at the airbase, the media was scrambled as the talks ended earlier than expected. Mr. Putin spoke first, referring to an agreement with President Trump.
I would like to hope that the agreement that we've reached together will help us bring closer that goal and will pave the path towards peace in Ukraine. We expect that Kiev and European capitals will perceive that constructively and that they won't throw a wrench in the works.
As he tried to sideline the Europeans, he heaped praise on the American leader, echoing his long-stated claim that the war wouldn't have happened if Mr. Trump had been in office.
Today, when President Trump saying that if he was the president back then, there will be no war. And I'm quite sure that it would indeed be so. I can confirm that.
Thank you very much, Mr. President.
Mr. Trump, though, said there hadn't been an agreement, but there was progress.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelensky and tell him about today's meeting. It's ultimately up to them.
Later, pressed on what the details were, he wouldn't say. He added that he would call President Zelensky and the Europeans to tell them about today's meeting, saying it was ultimately up to them. And then more mutual praise.
I've always had a fantastic relationship with President Putin, with Vladimir.
This was not the outcome Mr. Trump wanted, but he portrayed it as getting closer to his goal of ending the war.
Again, Mr. President, I'd like to thank you very much, and we'll speak to you very soon and probably see you again very soon. Thank you very much, Vladimir.
Next time in Moscow.
This meeting amounted to a further shift as Washington tilts towards Moscow without any obvious concessions from Vladimir Putin. A new moment of anxiety for Ukraine and for Europe as the peacemaking president can only seem to find more war. Tom Bateman, BBC News, Anchorage, Alaska.
Well, before leaving Alaska, President Trump spoke to Fox News Channel's Sean Hannity about how he thinks it's down to Mr. Zelensky to make a deal.
You talked to Vladimir Zelensky. What's your advice to...
Make a deal.
Make the deal.
Got to make a deal, yeah. Look, Russia's a very big power. And they're not. They're great soldiers. They have great, but, you know, they also had the best equipment. You know, they had our equipment. We have the greatest military equipment in the world, but they did have courage in fighting. And, you know, they're fighting a big war machine. And I think are close to a deal, but I don't like saying it. I always say, if I'm really close, I say 50-50, because so many things can happen. But I think President Putin would like to solve the problem, and it was a problem that should have never happened.
Our correspondent Tom Bateman is in Anchorage with more on what President Trump has said he will do next.
He will call NATO leaders and Mr. Zelensky himself, although you have to ask what exactly is he going to be putting to them, because it's clear that the key concession he wanted from Vladimir Putin to sign up to a ceasefire he has not got. On the other hand, I think the Europeans are going to be to some extent relieved that the worst case scenario for them, which would have been a carve up by the Americans and the Russians of Ukraine over the heads of the Ukrainians, certainly hasn't been agreed to in this meeting. And they were working earlier this week to try and get an assurance from Mr. Trump that that would not happen. And we heard him say, you know, it was notable that he said in the press conference that he would call the Europeans and Mr. Zelensky, and what happened next was up to them, basically. But really what that leads to is, well, how does Mr. Trump take it from here? Because he's really played his trump card with this summit. He'd always said he wanted to get Mr. Putin in the room, and that's where he thought he could get a breakthrough and enter the war. Well, he hasn't got that. He says there's progress, but it's not clear at all what that is.
How do you see the results or lack of results of these summits playing out in the US? Because, of course, President Trump's already facing criticism for not reaching a ceasefire at these talks.
I think it's a really important question, you know, and I think what we saw from Vladimir Putin there very characteristically was his attempt to prise open divisions that he thinks will weaken the position of the West when it comes to the war in Ukraine. So on the one hand, he was saying, for example, that he didn't want to see the Europeans throwing a wrench into this agreement, as he put it, although there wasn't an agreement, according to Mr. Trump, this agreement between the US and Russia, trying to undermine the process. He has long sought to further divisions, create more divisions between America and its European allies, and it seems he's having further success with that. The other division that he tried to prise further open is the domestic one, politically, within the United States. So, extraordinarily, we heard Mr. Putin say, oh, I confirm that this war would not have started if Mr. Trump had been in office. Instead of Joe Biden, he means, not naming him. But that plays into the long-stated claim by Mr. Trump that there wouldn't have been a war if he was president back in 2022. And of course, Mr. Putin knows that that plays into the false claim by President Trump that he won the 2020 election and that there was robbed of him. And so you see Mr. Putin using his moment in front of the cameras on US soil to play into and try and exploit divisions among Americans that have been so angry and so politically damaging to this country. And so I think that will lead to a further exacerbation of the question within Mr. Trump's own base as to, well, where is this process going? And it was quite notable that in his interview with Fox News with Sean Hannity, a cheerleader of Mr. Trump, after the press conference, that he was being asked, well, why, you know, effectively, why are you continuing with this process when America isn't endangered by the war in Ukraine, and basically it's not our problem. You're just doing this out of the goodness of your heart. And so I think, you know, you're seeing that question start to emerge in the sort of commentary in the Trump base around the political capital, as they see it, as being expended on this process. In the end, if it continues to fail, Mr. Trump sees that, who is he going to blame? Russia or Ukraine? And I think when you look at the treatment meted out to those two leaders in the course of this year, it's pretty clear where he is likely to put the blame for its perceived failure.
And Tom, is there still a risk that if this all gets too complicated, President Trump could walk away? Because, of course, he's also looking at other crises, for example, in the Middle East, and also domestic policy as well.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely inevitable he will walk away if he sees the processes going nowhere. And that really is why we have seen Vladimir Putin continue to do what he has done at every turn in this diplomatically. I mean, I was flying with Secretary of State Rubio, you know, several times earlier this year as they sort of pushed that diplomatic process first to talk to the Russians, then to try and get the Russians and the Ukrainians to talk to each other. And it's really felt like that whole process has run out of steam. And Mr. Trump had said, well, let me get in the room with Vladimir Putin and I can get a breakthrough. That was always his point. Well, we've done that now, and that hasn't happened either. And so what Mr. Putin has to do at every turn, and what he's tried to do at every turn, is to play for more time. Remember, he has the military advantage. He has the domestic weapons production the Ukrainians don't have. They've always relied on the Americans. Well, the Biden-era pipeline of weapons is running out and will run out into the next year or two. That gives Mr. Putin an advantage to continue to simply play for time. And that is why every time Mr. Trump has basically imposed a deadline, Mr. Putin has wriggled out of it and imposed more conditions effectively, and President Trump's deadlines have in effect turned into lifelines for Vladimir Putin. And so I think in the end we come back to this point where will Mr. Trump try and put the blame. If you look at the ambush and humiliation of Volodymyr Zelensky by Mr. Trump in the Oval Office earlier this year versus a red carpet welcome and reintegration into the arms of the US that he's given to Mr. Putin here, I think that gives you a clue as to where he's going to put the blame if he sees it going wrong.